Thanks, Kate. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I'm very delighted to have you here. Before I get started, Anne, did you have anything you wanted to add about upcoming events?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ann Kunzen. Again, I'm new here at the Algonquin Area Public Library, but I'm not new to genealogy. In fact, I've been involved in some of the webinars and collaborative programming that we've done over the past couple of years. So I'm really glad to be here and be able to focus on genealogy. It's a passion of mine. We do have some genealogy programming coming up in April and May. So watch for the Algonquin newsletter. We will have our genealogy interest group starting up again once a month, starting in April and then again in May. And then we also have your guide to the 1950 census. We have Lisa Louise Cook in a webinar format on May 17th. So watch for the newsletter for that information as well. That'll be completely online and you can start registering for that when you get the newsletter. Okay. And that's all I have for now, but feel free to email questions to the email address that I popped into the chat. If your question is about something besides FamilySearch and using FamilySearch tonight, I'm happy to answer those questions later on if you just send an email, okay? And that's about it. So go ahead, take it away, Tina. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Kate and Ann, both for having me tonight. And thank all of you again for being here with us. So I am Tina Beaird. I am the owner of Tamarack Genealogy. I am also, as Ann and Kate are, a librarian at the Plainfield Public Library in Plainfield, Illinois. I'm the genealogy and local history librarian there, and I will have been there 20 years as of September. So I started when I was terribly, terribly young, an infant really. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is FamilySearch. So a lot of us, most of us have probably used FamilySearch at some point in the course of our genealogy. They have completely redesigned and refreshed the website in the last couple of months. So if you have not been on in a while, it's going to look completely different to you. And some of the search strategies and parameters are a little different as well. So I'm going to talk about how the collections work. I'm going to kind of walk you through a couple of examples of searches. I'm going to then talk about doing a slightly deeper dive using other websites in conjunction with FamilySearch. I'm going to talk about their book collections. We're going to talk about getting into their genealogies. And then we're going to talk lastly about the Wiki. So there'll be a couple of stopping points within there. So if you had a question or two, we should have enough time to be able to take those questions instead of making you wait until the end. I'm going to turn my camera off because those of you who know me know that I do nothing but talk with my hands. It is a family trait and tradition. So in order to not be terribly distracting to you, I'm going to turn my camera off mostly so you can see my full screen as well. And then I will turn my camera back on at the very end. So let's dig in. Let's talk about FamilySearch. So a little information about what FamilySearch is and how it works. It's a site that is free. It has access to everyone. Records are from around the globe. We're talking about billions of individual records from every continent around the world. They have partnerships with every major genealogy company, whether it's Ancestry, whether it's Fold3, whether it's MyHeritage, whether it's Genie, whether it's Find a Grave. So you're going to see bits and pieces of those collections pop up into FamilySearch as well. The site is run by the Latter-day Saints who believe in their religious tenets that everybody should have access to be able to trace their genealogy in order to bring family members into the church if they were not originally members of the Latter-day Saints. So that's why genealogy is so important to them, because they want to be able to be inclusive and to be able to bring people into the fold of the church. And that benefits all of us, whether we are Latter-day Saints or whether we are Jewish or whether we are Catholic, doesn't matter. We are going to find records that are going to relate to our heritage, our ancestry, and our family, both current and previous. With that being said, they have gone around the globe for over 50 years, digitizing, well, at the time it was microfilming. So they were microfilming records. And then once they stopped the microfilming process, they switched to digitization. So they've really been working on digitizing records for over the past decade. They actually were ahead of schedule. So what they were doing was they were digitizing every single one of the over 1 million reels of microfilm that they had within their vaults in Utah, digitizing them to make them available online. They had a goal of 20 years. They actually finished well ahead of schedule. So now every single one of their microfilm reels have been digitized and are accessible through the website. It's not always easy to find. It can be really, really complicated. I'm going to kind of walk you through some strategies and some ideas on how to dig into some of these collections and try to find what you're looking for. But they're still processing, and they're never going to stop processing these records collections. And what I mean by that is that a record might have been digitized, but it doesn't mean that it's been indexed. It doesn't mean that somebody has transcribed that record either. So certain collections, and I'll point these out to you in just a minute, certain collections have been digitized and they have had an index built, or they have been transcribed so they're fully searchable. Some of them have just been digitized. So you would have to go through it page by page as if you were looking at the original microfilm reel. And there's a very easy way to distinguish between the two just by looking at the icons on the website. And I'm going to show you how to recognize those in just a second. And those are in your handout too. So you'll see in the handout on the first page kind of how you can readily recognize what it is you're looking at. So besides just the records of churches and military records and land records and probates and vital records in churches and government offices all around the globe, they also digitize millions of pages of books as well. And these are things like county histories, city directories, cemetery indexes, family histories, and then genealogical and historical society newsletters, family newsletters. So there's all kinds of things that you can find in their book collection as well that you might not have realized that you had access to, and that you had access to these records for free. So I'll talk about those as well. And then lastly, I'm going to finish up talking about the Wiki and what I absolutely adore about the Wiki, which sets it apart from every other genealogical company that has a reference or research page, is the fact that their Wiki includes records that they do not own. So some companies will explain how to do searches within their collection. They'll explain how to do research on a particular topic that they have records for, but they're not going to tell you where else you can go to look. And what I love about the FamilySearch Wiki is the fact that it'll point me to my heritage. It'll point me to Find a Grave. It'll point me to records outside of their collection, because it's all in an effort to teach you how to be a better genealogist. So we'll talk about the Wiki at the very end as well. So now what's the difference between FamilySearch and Ancestry? Like I said, FamilySearch is free. It's open to everybody. The records that they're showing you are original digitized scans of records of all kinds. Like I said, church records, military records, vital records, land, probate records. So these are official government documents or official church documents, and you're looking at the originals. On some sites, Ancestry included, sometimes you will just get an index or an abstract. You're not looking at the original record. Ancestry is really good about that. The vast majority of their collections will also have the digital image. But if you've ever noticed at the bottom, when it gives you the information about where the records came from, a lot of companies are going to point you back to FamilySearch. And you'll see that in Ancestry as well. When you look at the information at the bottom of the page, it'll say that the record collection came from, the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. So they do work together in tandem in a lot of different ways. They both offer manuscript collections. They both have unique collections that are really only available through them. For FamilySearch, a lot of that is in their book collection, where they're showing you records that digitized scans of books that they've collected over the years that might not be available in other locations. But for me, the easy decision is I'm going to use the free site versus the subscription site, because as a genealogist, I want to save my money and my resources for those things that I cannot find online, that I have to send a letter to a local courthouse or something like that and pay for a copy of a document. I want to save my money for that. And I love the fact that FamilySearch is free and it allows me to do research all across the globe and not just within the US. Ancestry is predominantly US. There are packages that you can buy for the UK and Canada and other global collections. But FamilySearch truly is already a global database. It's already a global collection. So I love that if I'm doing research in Hungary, or if I'm doing research in Brazil, or if I'm doing research in Australia, I have access to those records just with a couple of clicks. So now, if you've been to the site, this is what you're going to see lately. Like I said, they revamped the website, so it's going to look slightly different. There are a couple of tweaks and changes here and there. You have the option to look at family trees. You have the option to search for records. You can add your own memories and photos and stories into their memories collections that go into the family tree, the global family tree. You can volunteer to help with indexing. They're always looking for people, especially people who speak multiple languages, because they always need people to translate and index and make available records in every language that you can think of. You can keep track of their activities up there as well. But you can see under search, that's where we're going to do the bulk of what we're talking about today. Yes, we're going to touch briefly on family trees because I want to talk about genealogies. But predominantly what we're going to talk about are images, we're going to talk about books, we're going to talk about the wiki, and this is where you're going to find that information. You have to have an account in order to access records. Accounts are free. You would just, on the homepage, you would just click on sign in or sign up. All they need is a username and password. In some instances, they'll ask you for a date of birth. By no means feel obligated to put your date of birth in there. I know that when I signed up for our library account, I did not. And that's just simply because they want you to build a tree and they want you to participate in the global family tree. So they want you to put your information in to get started. Don't feel that you're obligated to do that. I'll talk a little bit about the family trees towards the end. I do not have my information up in their family tree, and I'll explain why that is a little later on. Oh, I used the wrong slide. I apologize. When you go to the search page that I had just shown you previously, and if you click on research records, there are a couple of different ways that you can search their collection. You can search the collection by location. So it shows you a map exactly like this, where you can click on the continent and you can click on the state, or you can click on the country where you want to do your research. I'm going to walk us through that first. And then you have the ability to search by collection type as well. So if I'm just looking for records in Illinois and I know I'm specifically looking for Cook County births, I can go directly to that collection to search. I'm going to show you some examples of that as well. And then just if I just want to search, if I just want to put in a particular name in the keyword box right on the homepage, I can easily do that as well. And I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like as well. So we've got 3 different ways that we're going to search family search collections. So first I'm going to talk about location. So when you go to their page and you click on a continent, I clicked on the United States, it brings me up a list that's alphabetical. So it's going to show me all of the United States records first, and then it's going to break it down by state. So it's going to show me Alabama all the way through Wyoming. And I get to see every single one of the collections that they have, that they've already scanned. These are ones that have either already been indexed or ones that are just, again, just the ones where here's your digitized collection and you can go through it. In your handout, you're going to see these little icons. So where you've got the camera, that's a collection that's been digitized and it's accessible, but it's not fully searchable just yet. So I can go in and I can search for the 3,900 names that are already done, or I can go and I can browse the collection to see the rest of them. I'm going to show you an example of that in just a couple of minutes. The ones that have the bar across the top, those are collections that are going to take you to another site. Here's the downside. Illinois Cook County Marriages wants to take you to the Cook County genealogy site, which has been offline for over 2 years now. So unfortunately, that link is not going to take you anywhere. But in theory, if we were to click on one of these others, Genealogy Bank historical newspapers, it's going to take us to the Genealogy Bank collection. Or if I were to click on United States recruits for the Polish Army, that's going to take us to the page for Haller's Army. And it's going to take you out of their collection. So what's beautiful, like I said, about FamilySearch is the fact that they really work well with every other major genealogy company, and they give us access, they point us to places where we can go and look for those records. But you see, there are some where there's no camera, where there's no information other than the title. So for example, United States births and christenings, 1867 to 1931. I can look at that collection, but I can't search that collection. I'd have to browse it. United States public records, these are done by names. So I would be able to look up my name, and I think I have an example of this in here for you, but there's no images attached to it. It's just data. It's just a database where they've pulled the information from, and there's no image to go along with it. So that's why I've got the data, but there's no image. That's why there's no camera. There's no physical image for you to take a look at. There's no original record, if that makes sense. So that's what those three different symbols mean, where there's no camera, there's camera, or there's a camera with a line over it. What's great about FamilySearch also, and Ancestry does this as well to an extent where I can search by the size of the collection. I can say I want to see the biggest collections or the smallest collections by just clicking on records in the upper right-hand corner. Or I can see when something was last updated. So if I click on last updated, it's going to put this by collection date for me. So I can see what things have been added. And I think I have a screenshot for you. There were even some things that were added yesterday to FamilySearch's collection. So, I mean, it's in real time. So we're looking at things that were updated and added to just yesterday. These can be absolutely phenomenal, especially if it's a collection that you've accessed before. Like if I've gone in and I've looked at Illinois Cook County marriages before, but the last time I looked at it might have been, July of 2019, I would be able to say, oh, there's been an update since the last time I looked. I might want to go in and check again to see if I can find that information that I might have missed or wasn't available the last time the collection was viewed by me. You should always have a detailed research log. Some of you heard me harp about this about a week ago in another lecture. But you should always keep track of where and how you're accessing information, because collections are constantly evolving. They're constantly changing. There's constantly new things being added. So you always want to keep a record of when the last time you searched something was, so that you can go back and search it again to see if anything new has been added. And this is the best way to be able to see what's brand new to the collections. I explained already about the cameras. So like I said, if there's no camera at all, it means that I can search this record, but there's no visible image because there's no original digitized scan that they did. Those cameras that have the line above them, those are the ones that are going to point you to another site. Camera with no box means that the images, they were indexed with images on FamilySearch. So those are the parameters that you're going to use when you're accessing these records. So in an instant, you can see whether or not you're going to be looking at an original birth certificate for great grandma, just simply based on the icons that are at the front of the collection. So now let's do an example. So I talked about how I can search a collection specifically. So if I go into the United States and I click on Illinois, I can look at the Illinois Cemetery Transcriptions collection by itself without it searching all 1 billion records that they have within FamilySearch. This is just searching the 5,000 images that are within this particular collection. So I can go in and I can read all about the collection, which I highly recommend that you do, because the how to use this collection is going to tell you whether or not the county, the city, or the cemetery you're looking for is even included. So instead of just jumping in and doing a search for Sophia Hayes, I could go in and find out whether or not her county, if Menard County is even represented in this collection, which will save you a lot of time. Or is Menard County included in this collection within the dates that are shown here on the screen? 1853 to 2009 is a huge time period. And for 5,000 images, that tells you that not every county, not every cemetery is going to be represented. So always read the how to use this collection first. Then you can do your search. But if you come up empty, if you strike out, if you're not finding what you're looking for, then I highly recommend browsing the images as well, because they might not have indexed, the cemetery might not have indexed down to the first name, down to the given name. They might have only indexed to last names. So you might miss some people because maybe Sophia was never listed as Sophia, or maybe her name is misspelled. So, sometimes just browsing can provide some good results as well. And I'm going to show you an example of doing a search here as well as browsing. So I did my search on Sophia Hayes. Let me take a step back. So here's what it looks like if you want to read about the collection, what's included and what's not included. So this tells me right here what types of images are available, who can access this collection, what's it going to tell me about the people who are represented. Here it tells me that in this collection, I could find deceased name, birth date, death date, and sometimes next of kin is listed. It's going to tell me where in the world this collection represents. It shows me that it's the state of Illinois. All of that is important in order to understand what you're accessing and whether or not the dates and periods and locations are represented. So I did a search on Sophia Hayes. I kind of cropped this image so we can see just her entry. But it tells me that there is a record for her, that she was buried on March 2nd, 1957, that she's in Centralia, that she's in Marion County in the United States. Now, there's a camera, which tells me that there's an image to the original scan. So when I clicked on the camera, it brought up the image for me and I highlighted it here at the bottom. So this is a chronological listing of burials for Elmwood Cemetery. So this is their interment list. And it tells me that, in March 2nd of 1957, Sophia Hayes was buried. It gives me the lot. It gives me the range, the section number, and the specific grave location. And then if there's any additional notes, it provides that for me as well. What it doesn't do is it doesn't put it into context for me. So it doesn't tell me who else is in that lot. It doesn't tell me any other information about her or her family. It's just giving me the chronological interment list for the cemetery itself, which is absolutely great. This is really useful information. But unfortunately, it's not the only information. So if I were just looking for Sophia Hayes and I went in and I did a search, and this was the only search I did, if I didn't browse the collection, then I would miss something really important. So what I did was I went back and I browsed the collection. I knew that it was Elmwood Cemetery because that's the information that was provided in that index entry for her. So I went and I pulled the information specifically. And by browsing the collection, it shows me all of the records they have for Elmwood Cemetery. So I went through some of these until I found a reference to Sophia Hayes. And what I found was this cemetery index card. And it tells me that for lot 53, which is the grave she's buried in range 16, it tells me these other people are buried in this grave as well. So it tells me besides Sophia, there are 6 other people. This is just the backside. 6 other people are buried in this grave. They could all be family. They might not be family, but it's important to have that information. It's important to be able to put Sophia's burial in context with what's going on around her. So it tells me that she's buried with 6 other people within this grave, gives me the information, gives me their names, gives me the dates that they were buried. And in this particular case, it gives me information about Joshua Meek, who had served in the Illinois Infantry during the Civil War. Great information and very, very useful to have. I didn't have enough room to show you the front of the card. It's more Meeks and Queens. So then it would be up to you to figure out whether or not those are family members of hers. But you notice this doesn't come up when I search under her name in the index, in the search box. So anytime you have the option, always browse, because you might find a gem like this that could break your tree wide open. So that's an example of just using the search, and then an example of how to use the browse feature. If you have the luxury, take the time and do both. So that's how you would search by location. It really does break it down. So if I clicked on Europe, I could click on Poland. I would be able to go through the records that are available that have been digitized for Poland or France or the UK or Italy or whatever it happens to be. Same thing for the US, it's broken down by state. Same thing for Australia, it's broken down by province. Same thing for South Africa, it's broken down by state. So it gives you the ability to kind of frame your research based on the location where you're searching. So if I just wanted to see every record collection that was available for Illinois, I could do that. And then I could pick and choose whether or not I thought that I might have familial information in one of those collections. Same thing would be true if I was looking at Russian records or if I was looking at Brazilian records. I would be able to pick and choose through those collections and decide based on location. Searching by collection title is the exact same thing, only you're doing it in a much more targeted way. So instead of searching by Poland to see what might be available, I can search specifically for Masonic Lodge records, or I can search specifically for, railroad records. It doesn't have to be by location. It's convenient, and it could be, and they might be broken down that way. but I can search this in different ways. I can say, I just want to see stillbirth records, wherever that happens to be. So I can, get an inventory of stillbirth collections across the globe. Here I did a search on cemetery because I wanted to see how many cemetery record collections did they have. And at the top, it tells me that there are 122 collections. And we can see this really does span the globe, from Paraguay to Pennsylvania, from Australia to Louisiana. And it breaks it down, just like I said. You could see how many records are in each collection. You can see when the last time these collections were updated. So we can see that for Chile and for Paraguay, that these collections were updated just a couple of days ago. And then you'll have some that might not have been updated for several years. But it gives me a very good indication of what exists out there. What am I looking for? How can I, either expand or limit my search to get the most out of the research I'm doing that day? You could also see along the left-hand side, and this is true when you search by location, that I can limit it. I can say, I just want to see records that are 1950 to the present, or I just want to see records that are from the 18th century. And I would be able to narrow my search results to that as well. I'll talk a lot more about narrowing search results when we do an actual search in just a second. But I want you to see how every single click that you make on this website, every decision you make about what collection you want to view or don't view, is going to change and alter the results that you're going to see on your screen. So if I were to click on Canada, it would limit me to just 2 records collections because that's what they have listed under cemetery. That might not mean that that's the only collections they have related to death. There might be, death certificates, there might be burial transfer permits, there might be funeral directors records, there might be coroner's inquest records. All of those revolve around the death process. They just don't have cemetery in its title. So that's where you have to keep in mind the words that you use matter. So think of all of the different ways you could say the same thing. So you could say cemetery, you could say burial ground, you could say graveyard. How many different ways can you search for or talk about the death process or the birth process or the marriage process or whatever it happens to be? So you're going to tailor your results based on those ideas. So here's an example. So I did a quick search, just kind of sorted my records collections based alphabetically. And I see, as you can see, I get everything from Alabama to Argentina to Arizona. I wanted to take a look at the Maricopa County probate records that they have indexed directly through FamilySearch. I can see that the collection was last updated in 2012. That's perfectly fine. It's still a very useful and legitimate collection, even if it hasn't been updated. That just means that they dumped everything into the site all at once. So everything that's up there is probably everything that they had. Doesn't mean they might not find a stray book here or there, or the more recent books might be added. But this is a really, really enormous collection. Some of these are absolutely, enormous. And here's an example of one that is. So when I click on this particular record collection, I can see that there are over 600,000 files that are included in this. It is absolutely 100% overwhelming. Because if you have absolutely no idea what the probate file number is, then good luck looking through 612, 1,000 files in order to find what it is you're looking for. But if you have a clue, because you could see these are all a 50-year span, they're not done by month, they're not done by decade, they're not done by year. But if you know, because you have a copy of a final page of a probate, that its number starts with, 3510, then you're golden. But yes, this is an extraordinarily hard collection to use, but I wanted you to see that some of these are absolutely enormous collections that will take a lot of work and a lot of digging in order to get the most out of them. But I could click on any one of these and I could look at the microfilm just as if I was sitting at the Maricopa County, Arizona courthouse looking at these records in person. So the one I clicked on was just that one file, if you noticed. And you can see it's only 43 pages. So you would be able to go through image by image by image and see this entire probate collection, page by page. But again, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. But that's kind of how that works. That's kind of how looking through collections specifically by title can allow you to really zoom in and be that specific in what you're looking for. Most of us, we just want to search. we just want to go in and put in our family name and see what comes up. And then we'll sort and we'll filter once we have a collection of names that are provided. So I went in and I did a search. My ancestor, my great-grandfather is George Keyes Middleton. So I went in and I did a search on George Middleton because I wanted to see what was available. I didn't really limit any parameters. My second search, I put in birth date, like birth year and death year, to kind of try to, give it some boundaries. I wouldn't do that the first time around. I would just see how many records come up just to get a ballpark for what we're looking at. Some names are a lot more common, so there's going to be a lot more records. I do have a John Smith in my family, so you can imagine that there are millions upon millions of entries for John Smith. But if you have a more specific name, something that's not quite so common, then your records results are going to be much more manageable. It just depends on what you're searching. So I did a search for George K. Middleton, and it gave me 127,000 results. We can see that George Middleton is a very, very common name. There's lots of different entries listed there. I did go in, like I said, and put in the birth years 1846 to 1918. Still, even by narrowing it down to his dates of birth and death, I still get 127,000 results. The first records typically are most relevant based on the information that you've entered. After the initial set of records, you're going to start getting looser entries. You'll get names that are similar. It might not be the dates you're looking for. It might not be the county or the state that you're looking for, but they're going to be similar in some nature, whether that's by a proximity of surname or a proximity of location. The Ancestry and FamilySearch work kind of behind the scenes using the old Soundex system. So Illinois driver's licenses are based on the Soundex. That's where all vowels are removed for a name, and you're left just with the consonants, and each one of those consonants is given a number. Now, my name is Beard. I have 3 vowels in a row. All of those are taken out. So I'm left with B, which is the beginning of my Soundex code, and then R and D. I don't have a third letter, so I get a 0. So for me, mine is B630, and that looks for anybody else whose surname matches that Soundex code. So for example, my maiden name was Tatara, Tatara, dropped out the T's, dropped out the A's. I just had T and then 1 R, So my Soundex code, oddly enough, was T, 360. It just reversed when I got married. But that brings up things like Tatar and Taylor and Tyler and things that are similar in structure that have that same Soundex code. So when you look at your results and you're like, why did I get Taylor? I'm not looking for Taylors. I'm looking for Tatars, or I'm looking for Turners. It's because it matches that Soundex number that kind of works behind the scenes. In Ancestry, it's that slider where it asks you, do you want exact or do you want just anything? It's more obvious there than it is here, but it's that same premise. So it's going to give you the most accurate results first, and then a looser set of like or similar results. And in this particular case, the records that it does pull up first, most of them are my George K. Middleton. So the top one, Find a Grave Index. Yep, that's my great grandfather. He is buried at Wood Soldiers and Sailors Home in Milwaukee. That's his entry. A little bit further down, yes, his first wife was Catherine Ryan. They did get married January 12th, 1875. So those records are good. But you could see it's going to bring up anybody whose name matches what I put in. So I get other entries that are going to pop up for George K. Middleton, who may or may not be my family, but you're not going to know that until you do your search. From there, you can start to limit it down. So I could go in and I can add more filters if I wanted to. And I'm going to walk you through some of these in a minute. So I can add a family member. I can add a location. If I have a specific collection, I can add that. So I went in and I added his mom and dad. I went in and I added his wife. I went in and I added that he was born in New York in the hopes that it was going to give me more accurate results. It didn't quite work exactly how I was hoping. The search is a lot like Google, where, you put in Smith genealogy and it doesn't really know to look for heraldry or family tree or other terms, ancestry, that you could use to say the same thing. Just doing a general search in FamilySearch kind of falls into that same category. That's why you want to either use those individual collections or you want to use the filters. So what you're using here under life events, where I can search by birth, marriage, residence, is not the same as using the filter results across the top. And I'm going to show you an example of that in just a second. So what does that mean? It means you're not going to do one search. It means you're going to do a dozen searches. And there's nothing wrong with that, because a dozen searches are going to turn you on to information that you didn't know existed. It's going to dig a little deeper. It's going to come at the problem or the question in a different angle. And that's exactly what you want as a genealogist. So I went in and I did the search and I really didn't get any results. That's okay. I went in and I did another search. So I went in and I did a search under the filters specifically for a location. I went in and did that exact same search using those columns on the right-hand side where it gave me the opportunity to put a location. And I'm going to show you the difference in the results that I had gotten. But here's just a snapshot of what that looks like. So if I want to filter by collection, what does that mean? That means things like census, birth, biography, military, church, sex, male, female, race gives me my options, birth gives me my countries and my states, residence is the same way. So here's the problem I have. George didn't live in just one place. George was born in New York, moved to Wisconsin, then went to Minnesota, then went to Iowa, then went to Illinois, then went back to Wisconsin. He lived in 5 different states. So when I try to look for George, it gets really, really complicated. And those are just states that I know about. He could have lived someplace else because, in fact, a lot of his records are in Moorhead, Minnesota, which is right on the Dakota border, so just outside of Fargo. So there could potentially be records for him there as well, although I haven't come across any yet. So how do I choose? You're going to have to choose them all. You're going to have to do a search for what they have under Iowa. You're going to have to do a search under what they have for Illinois. You're going to have to do a search for what they have under New York. So that's why I said you're not going to do one search. You're going to do multiple searches just to make sure that you're not missing anything. You could try to layer your filter results. I'm going to show you what happened when I did that. It doesn't work quite as well as you would hope that it would work, but I'm going to show you what that looks like as well. So here's that one, just using the columns on the right-hand side. I went in and I told it, here are his dates. He was born in the United States. He lived in Illinois. Brings up a set of 896 results for me. The top 2 records, those are good records, but that was it. Only the top 2 records were actually accurate records for him. But I didn't know that there was a record for him at Danville at the Old Soldiers and Sailors Home in Illinois. So that was a new find for me at the time. And you could see, based on the little icons that they have on the right-hand side, I can see that there's an image for both of these records that reference George Middleton. They're just, the bottom one is just an index card for Josephine. The top one is the page out of the National Home Register. Not a whole ton of information, but still a neat record to have to add to my collection. But you could see how I put in George K. They gave me the most accurate results they had first, but then I just start to get whatever's close. So I get William George, I get George W, I get George. Remember, my name's Tina Beaird. That's what I go by. That's how everybody knows me. Very rarely, unless my mother is mad at me or the federal government needs me for my taxes or something else, I never go by my full official name. But the same might be true for your ancestor. So George might have been, while most typically he's listed as George K. In some records, he's just going to be listed as George. In some records, he's going to be listed as George Keys. Always make sure you're searching all options. In some records, he could be listed as GK because they abbreviated it for whatever reason. So you're going to keep playing with this. You're going to keep changing your results to see what you can find. So I did a search. It gave me 900 records. The top 2 records were good. I was able to use those in my research. Then what I did was I used those filters across the top. So I took out location from the right-hand column. I did leave the dates, but then I filtered across the top specifically by residence. So I did a search again under residence and chose Illinois, and look at how my results changed. I went from having 900 results to having just 335, and the top record is good. None of the other records were pertinent. every single search you do, this is what's going to happen. So you have to make sure that you're doing all conceivable searches. Use the columns on the right-hand side. Limit it by parents' names. Limit it by spouse's name. Then delete all that and go up and use the collections across the top. You're going to find different results. Unfortunately, that's just how it works. But don't skip the top bar because you think everything's repeated on the right-hand side. They absolutely aren't. They are completely different search strategies. Here's another example. I tried to go in and I tried to use multiple filters at once. So I tried to go in and choose Minnesota as my residence. I tried to limit my record collection to just the census, and I tried to limit it to just those George Middletons who were born in New York. I was not successful, not even close to being successful. The first couple of records, several of these records actually were good, and I actually got a surprise on a record that I wasn't expecting, but it didn't filter all three together at once. It did give me 97 records, but it didn't give me what I asked for, which was census records for Minnesota for men named George Middleton born in New York. Because as I go through the records, I can see born in Wisconsin, I can see born in St. Paul, Minnesota, I can see born in Ohio. It didn't do what I asked. So keep that in mind. If you think that you can stack or layer filters, it is not going to work the way that you think it's going to work. It took my predominant record, which was choosing my location as Minnesota. It took the last filter that I put in, and that's what it ran with. But what it gave me was an absolute surprise. Yes, George K. Middleton, his first wife, Catherine, Kate, that we saw the marriage record for, that's a good record. The one above, the one right below it, this one was a surprise to me because I knew he had a son, George K. Middleton, named after him. But what I did not know was that he had filed a draft card in 1942. So that was a great find for me because it's not what I was looking for, but it was a happy coincidence. So I found a record I wasn't exactly looking for, but that's still a family member. It's still George K. Middleton. It's just not the one I was looking for. So sometimes you'll get lucky. Along the right-hand side, it shows me those collections. So like I said, I could have limited, I tried to limit just by census, but see how it shows me birth, marriage, and death? There's 2 records. Censuses, there's 13 records. Military records, there's 2 records. If I kept going down, it would show me each of those individual collections. So it took the last filter I put in, which was residence, and then kind of gave me the filter by collection off to the side. Wasn't 100% successful, but it did give me some good information. So just remember that you're not going to really be able to stack filters. So here's an example of those. This is that census. So that top entry that we saw, 1885 census, I click on that link. It shows me the page, gives me all of the people who are within the household with him, which is true. It's his wife, Catherine, his children from his first marriage, Frank, Annie, Mary, Elizabeth, and Robert. What you do not see there, you don't see George K. Middleton there because George was born in 1886 and this record's 1885. So she could conceivably have been pregnant and carrying George in that particular census record, but he is not listed because he was not born yet. And here's a blow up of that. So I can see that he's listed as being a resident of Minnesota, gives me the names of the kids. So there's some good information in there. This one's 1875. This is 10 years previously. I can see that, there aren't any kids listed yet. So he was a busy man. So before I go into the records collections, I want to pause for just a second, double check with Ann, see if anybody had any questions. Otherwise, we'll move along on to how to use these with other sites.
I haven't seen anybody post any questions so far, and that's okay. If you have questions that come up as we go on, feel free to type them in and I'll read them to Tina at a good time, okay? And we'll try and make sure we get to all the questions. So don't be shy. Okay, thanks.
All right, so I used to have 2 examples in here. My other example used to be the Cook County Genealogy Index, which is still not online again. I won't get on my soapbox about that, but I will say, there is a link on the website for the Cook County Clerk's Office where you can email them absolutely 100% email Karen Yarborough and tell her you'd really like to see that database back online sometime this century. To take it down at the start of COVID was a really interesting choice. But now we only have one example because unfortunately I can't show you those. So I do a lot of Scottish research. That's where my company name comes from. This is an example of how you can use FamilySearch in conjunction with other paid subscription sites. And this would be true with Ancestry as well. So for example, if I go into Scotland's People, I can do a search on their website for free. It does not cost me anything. But if I want to view that record, if I want to see the original document, then I have to buy credits in order to see individual scanned documents. And you buy credits in batches of 30, and then it's usually about 6 credits for each document, unless you want to probate, and then they charge you 10. So if I wanted to do a search for Stephen and Sibylla Finley, I could go in and do a search. That would be perfectly fine, but I wouldn't be able to see the original image without paying for it. How can I use FamilySearch in conjunction with this? Well, remember what I said about how FamilySearch has indexed and, well, not indexed, but has digitized all of the microfilm reels within their collections. These are some of those microfilm reels that have already been digitized. So I can go into FamilySearch and look at the originals at no cost, but I need to know what I'm looking for and where I'm looking. So I go into Scotland's People, I do a search for Stephen Finley and Sibylla Wiley. I find their marriage entry that they were married on June 6, 1811, tells me that they were married in the town of Stewarton. Fantastic. That's exactly what I needed to know. I could go into FamilySearch and I can search the catalog. And I didn't spend any time talking about the catalog up until this point, but if your library is an affiliate library, which most of our libraries in the Chicagoland area are, what that means as an affiliate is that I have access to digitized records that normally you would have to be in a family history center or library to view. Now that they've digitized all the records, this isn't really the case, but this is the simplest and fastest and easiest way to find that information than trying to use images. And I'm going to explain why in just a minute. So I can go up into the search. And remember, catalog was listed in that record. I can click on catalog and it's going to ask me, what do I want to search? Do I want to search by location? Do I want to search by specific film or fiche number? And I can do that. So I had told it that I was looking for, I just did a search looking for Stephen Finley. And it searched across their collections and it found a reference in the Scotland marriages. And you could see across the top, it says Scotland marriages 1561 to 1910. Great. I see the entry, June 6th, 1811, matches what I saw in Scotland's People. Stewarton, Ayrshire, Scotland, matches what I saw on Scotland's People. Sibylla Wiley, yep, everything is good there. You see there's no camera, which means there's no digital image. In this collection that they have indexed, they don't have the digital images attached to it, but I can still get to the digital images in a fairly straightforward way. So if I were to click on this record, under information, it's going to give me not the call number, but the microfilm reel number. And then all I have to do is go into the catalog and plug in that microfilm reel number, which is available for me right here on the screen, 805, 8961. And it's going to show me the images. So if I'm at home and I'm trying to do this through the card catalog, it's going to say that it's locked and you're going to see a little key above it. If I'm at an affiliate library like my library, or if I'm at a family history library, that little key would be gone and I would have the ability to browse through the microfilm as if I had the reel in front of me, as if I had requested the reel from the family history library. So I used Scotland's People to get the date and the location. I went into FamilySearch and used the Scotland Marriages collection. Let me go back one slide. So if I were to click on this, the little, what looks like the little document, the little piece of paper, that's going to bring up that information about where this lives within the catalog at FamilySearch. And that's what gave me the catalog number for me to go and plug in. So when I went back into the catalog, then I was able to see, well, here's the microfilm. I can view it. And sure enough, going through the pages, I fast forwarded it till I got to 1811. And And right there at the bottom of the page, there's the original Stephen Finley, a weaver, marries Sibylla Wiley, both of Stewarton, and it gives me the information on the date they were married, the bands, how much they paid to have the bands posted. So I use Scotland's People. Yes, I could have saved myself time. I could have just paid the 6 credits and gotten a copy of the document. But when you have really large families and you have to access a lot of records, it is well worth it to me to do it this way, to look it up, get the information, and then pull it up in FamilySearch than to have to pay for each one of those documents. But what's beautiful about this now is that I can browse this reel. So I can look for brothers and sisters of Stephen and Sibylla getting married as well. And on the same microfilm, they had births and marriages combined onto one film. So then I could go and look through the books, look at the microfilm reel and look for the births of their children as well. So I could do all of that by just doing that little research, getting the film number and pulling it up in the catalog to open up a whole branch of the Finley tree. So that's how you can use this in tandem. It's the same thing with Ancestry or Genealogy Bank. So we saw that little camera with the line over it that said that, Genealogy Bank obit index. Some of the obits are already digitized and available. You can look through the catalog to see if there are records pertaining to vital records by county, family histories by county. There's a lot of different ways to search the catalog. And a lot of these records are already scanned and available. You're just looking for that little camera icon. So now I told you that everything has already been digitized in their collection, but not everything digitized has been indexed. So there's a bit of a disconnect while they play catch up. Yes, they were ahead of schedule. Yes, they digitized all of the reels that they had, but they're still processing, like I had mentioned. So they might have digitized the record, but that doesn't mean that they've indexed or transcribed the records yet. So when you go to images underneath that search bar, this is what you're going to see. So you choose your place, or if you can click search by image groups, and here are your topics. I can search by education, I can search by immigration and migration. I can search, I mentioned stillbirths earlier. I can search for adoptions. So you can search by location. I can search by type. But here's where it gets really complicated. They break them down into what they call packets or folders. So Cook County marriages for April of 1911 might have 2,500 marriages that took place in just April of 1911. And when I search this, it breaks it down into those folders. So it might only show me 123 records, 413 records, 917 records. It's not showing me every marriage that took place in April of 1911. So it can get kind of confusing. Well, it can get really confusing and kind of complex on how are you going to find that information. So I will go in and I will occasionally search images just to kind of see what's out there. I always am more successful by going in and searching the catalog and looking for the microfilm reel and searching the reel if I'm at an affiliate library. But some of those reels haven't been listed as digitized yet. So you're going to find many of those in the catalog that have no camera image, but we all know they've been digitized now. So how do we find them? This is where images comes in, but this is where it gets super confusing as well. So like I said, they break them down by folder, by the digital group instead of the microfilm number. So it can get complicated figuring out what you're looking at. By no means have I mastered this because it's only been available for about 2 months. So I'm still trying to figure it out myself. But I went in and I did a search for Cook County. I wanted to see what kind of records were available. I specifically chose naturalization records. And what you can see is there's 3,840 records in this collection. But see how it breaks it down into chunks? 1,160, 1,181, 1,184. And it kind of tells me how it broke it down, that these were volumes 452, 449, 455. If you don't know what volume, it's going to be hard to figure it out because, this just gives a ballpark, 1922 to 1935, whereas the catalog record might tell you specifically, this is 1922, this is 1923, this is 1924. So, you know, we have to figure out now through the images what volume 449 is. What year is that? What year is 455? So, you know, there's going to be lots of clicking and back and forth and going in between collections. So if I click on one of these, so I clicked on the one on the bottom and it brought up that collection for me. Let's see if I can bring this one to the front. Ah, I forgot that I enlarged my screen, so I can't bring it up to the front. But if I brought it up to the front, you'd be able to see the start of the microfilm reel. It's only showing me those 1,100 records out of the entire collection of 3,800. In some records collections, when you click on an image to view it, up in the upper right-hand corner, sometimes it'll give you the luxury to view the whole reel. Sometimes it does not. So again, it's going to be hit or miss. But this tells me that, you know, this group of images either has multiple items, meaning there's more than one book, or, you know, they were combined onto one reel, meaning that volumes 3, 4, and 5 are all on the same microfilm reel, or volumes 7, 8, and 9 are all on the same microfilm reel. So it's going to give me that information that I was telling you about. Always make sure you look at how to use this collection. And then it gives me the information underneath it. So I can browse from image to image to image. Whereas if I was looking in the catalog, these might not have already had the camera for me to view. It's not easy. It is very complicated. It is going to be a lot of trial and error, but don't let that dissuade you. You can find some great stuff in here. But if when you open a record, if it has that link that says view the whole microfilm, by all means, click on that. If it doesn't, in this little information description, so if I were to scroll down a little bit underneath where it tells me that it's 1922 to 35, that it's Naturalization Records, it says volume 455 and gives me the naturalization numbers. If I scroll down a little bit more, or if I hover over one of the images, I'm going to see the little eye. If I click on that little eye, that's where it's going to provide me with the microfilm number. So if I want to see if that whole reel is available to browse, I'm going to copy that microfilm number, go into the catalog, plug it in, and see if I can view it.
You know, we have a question, and then
Yeah.
I just wanted to also point out that we're getting close to our end time, so we may have to jump around a bit. But the question is regarding having, if it says no images available for a birth record specifically for Cook County, is there a way to request the record? Was that that email address that you were talking about?
Yeah, you used to be able to search the index that David Orr's office had put together when David Orr was still Cook County clerk. Unfortunately, that was taken down with the new recorder, and the recorder's office and the clerk's office merged recently. So now she's both the recorder and the clerk. That came down. So there's not a way to do it through Cook County. You have to fill out the paper form and have somebody physically go and pull it for you instead of just being able to buy the digitized copy. Again, but what I would do is, there's ways within here, without going into too much detail or eating up too much time, where I can look for those records, because Illinois has them by births by county and births by the state, like the state records. If I can't find it under Cook County, I might just look under Illinois births and see if Cook County's in the list and try to access it that way and see if there's a camera image for those. So it works really well with death certificates for Cook County deaths because they're all listed under the Illinois deaths. So it's broken down by county. So you have to look under the whole state instead of just the county in order to get access to those. But in some instances, you can find the original, even though it says in the collection that it doesn't exist. You just got to dig a little deeper.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. Kate has said that we can go till 8:30 if you're okay with that, Tina. And
but I won't. I'm not. We're gonna hit books right now in just a second.
More
so we're
genealogy.
gonna breeze through the last
you have
two.
To go, if anyone has to go, go ahead and go. But you can watch the video later. Okay, carry on. Thank you.
So here's what I'm talking about. So this is a snapshot of that column that was on the right in the previous slide. And underneath where we had that item entry 2 and the volume number, it gives us the film reel, the packet number. I could take that number and plug it into the catalog, and it's going to show me all of the different microfilm. So I can see here, just in this little screenshot, that there are cameras. So I can view the original, the entire microfilm, instead of just those where they break it down into packets. So they are accessible and they're available. I can search the index, that's what's in red, but if I want to browse the reel, I can do that as well. Oh, I forgot about trees. Trees are quick, takes 30 seconds. So you can search family trees. FamilySearch has what they call their global family tree, their one big family tree, where everybody works on this collaboratively. Now, there's downsides to this and there are positives to this. The downside is the fact that anybody can add or delete any information. The positive is the fact that the changes are tracked. So if I go in and I put my family information in and my cousin decides she doesn't want to be included and she goes in and deletes her family branch out, I can see that those changes were made and who made them. I could choose to put them back in, or I can choose not to. Another plus is the fact that personal images and stories can be attached to these as well. So you can get some great photos of ancestors you may not have ever seen before. You can create a watch list. So if I want to see if anybody adds anything on George K. Middleton, I can follow his name. So if somebody makes a change or adds him to there, I'll be able to see that as well. The biggest downside and why I don't have my family information in there is because it's not locked down. Anybody can change it. Anybody can come in and change my information for George. And I'm just a little uncomfortable with that. I don't like people having access to change my tree that I've put together. But here's an example of that. So I can go in and I can see George K. Middleton shows up in a variety of different types of records. This one happens to be the shared family tree. So I can see that there are 160,000 results for people with the name George Middleton. Again, you can see I get Keys, I get K, I get George, I get a variety of things. This particular record has his date of death. It's for his burial up in Milwaukee. It tells me who his parents are, so I know that's a good record. Anytime something looks close, I'm going to take a look at it. Birth years are off. There might be some slight discrepancy. I'm still going to look at it just to make sure I'm not overlooking an important detail. But they have the IGI in here. They have the pedigree charts in here. Basically, like I said, people can go in and they can add information to these trees. So I could fill in George's second wife, my great-grandmother, Josephine. But if I wanted to, I could delete Catherine out if I felt like it. That's where, anybody can add or change any of these records. But you can use this, definitely use it in your research, use it, take it with a grain of salt because the information could be reliable. It might not be reliable. The beauty of it being collaborative is that hopefully somebody's going to fix erroneous information, but you can never be too sure. But it's a good starting point. So there's lots of ways where they pull this data to make it available in the tree. Here's another example of those records. I can see who added it. Stacy Middleton is my cousin. I do not know who Maria Cummings is. She might be family in some way, but it shows me when those changes were edited or made. Like I said, they pull all of this information out of these different genealogies. So they pull it out of the International Genealogical Index and the Pedigree resource file. These were original paper documents that people submitted to the LDS Church for filing to create their documentation for their family trees. These are closed, they're no longer added to, but they're still really useful pieces of that puzzle. They also have things in there like the Guild of One Name Studies, which is a fantastic resource if you're searching on a particular surname, not an individual. So if I was looking for Middleton or Craig or Kearns or whatever it happens to be, Guild of One Name Studies is going to show me all over the world where these names are represented. And in some cases, bring me down into specific trees. Ancestral Files, those are those old path files. They have a lot of partner and community trees in there that they've pulled from other websites like Genie and MyHeritage and other places. So lots of resources. Here's again an example. This is one that was pulled out of the IGI. So this was a specific record. This is that birth record for Anna Middleton. So that birth record only had her mom and dad listed, no other information. So that's all that shows up in the IGI is her dates and her mom and dad's names. So books are really, really important, and I want to walk you through this. This will take less than 5 minutes. Like I said, they've got millions of pages of books that they've digitized from things that were donated or added to their collections over the last century. So these will include things like your typical family histories, your county histories, your cemetery headstone readings from local genealogical societies, things like, Daughters of the American Revolution, newsletters, stuff like that. So it's a huge assortment of things. What's fantastic about these is a lot of websites stop at 1924 because of copyright. FamilySearch goes way beyond that because these are books that they've either purchased or have the rights to. So I'll find things in these collections that go all the way up into the 2000s. So while a lot of other sites like Happy Trust and like Google Books will have to stop at a certain date, FamilySearch isn't held to that obligation. So you'll find some really great stuff that has been published in the last 50 years. It is fully searchable. I can search by an individual name. I can search by a topic. I can search by a place. I can search for a specific cemetery, and it's going to tell me if they have anything in their collections. Again, I went in and did a search for George K. Middleton in quotes because I specifically was looking for his name listed like that. Not George Keys, not George, specifically George K. And what it brought up surprised me because I didn't know that the Hendershot family had its own newsletter that they published every quarter. The Hendershots are one of George's daughters marries a Hendershot. This is their family newsletter, and somebody is referencing George in that family newsletter. Now, unfortunately, I can't view the newsletter, but I get all the information. I see that it's from January 1st, 2001. It gives me the information so I could contact the LDS Church. I could contact the Family History Library in Salt Lake City and put in a genealogy request asking for this entry, or I could see if another library has it through WorldCat. But I didn't even know this newsletter existed. So by searching specifically on him, it brought up some really cool information. I know that he lived in Clay County. So the history of Minnesota, of Clay County, is important because he's going to show up in that as well. So you can download books, you can view books. I'm going to show you. So here's one of the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. This one specifically for Arizona. I can see that there are 168 pages in this volume. Tells me everything about the organization. It's like a history, brief history, and then their 1901 annual convention. So it's all of the testimonials and lectures that were given in 1901. But I can view the entire book. And the beauty is I can even download the entire book as well. So when I click on view all 168 pages, across the bottom, I have access to how I want to see this information. I can look at it as multiple pages at once by clicking on the little Rubik's Cube on the left-hand side. I can see just 2 pages. I could see just 1 page. But the really cool part is I can search it by clicking on the magnifying glass, or I can download the whole volume as a PDF and go through it at my leisure. So it gives me everything that I need to be able to search this book in order to find the surnames or find the information that I'm looking for. And their book collection is truly outstanding. I highly recommend going through and taking a look. But remember what I said, your searches are only going to be as good as the terms that you use. Remember I showed you the different examples in the filters in the catalog. Same is going to be true when you're searching books. Look at how many entries we have for cemetery spelled correctly, right? We have 18,000 results, but look at all the results we have for cemetery spelled wrong. So keep that in mind too. If your name is often misspelled, spell it how you think it might be misspelled, or cemetery being misspelled, or the name of the town being misspelled, because it happens. It's not uncommon for misspelling. So if you were looking under cemetery spelled correctly, you might miss some pretty cool stuff. So it's worth it to go in and take a look and see all these other alternatives that might be able to provide some good information. So what are our risks? I already talked about family trees being accessible and changeable by anyone. The information that's provided through FamilySearch is almost exclusively public records. So things like vital records, things like probate records, land records, those are all public records. But when you find things like church records, organizational records, they're not necessarily public records. So the question becomes, is this a violation of your privacy? Do they have the right to make this information accessible? I'm on the board of the Illinois State Genealogical Society, and we actually had FamilySearch take down some digitized collections because in our agreement with them in the 1970s, we told them that they were not allowed to put personal information for currently living people up on their website or in their collections. So we actually had some things removed last year that shouldn't have been up there. So you absolutely have the right. If you find information that shouldn't be public, these organizational or church records, you have the right to contact somebody and do that. But But then there's another view of this that believes that the more people who have eyes on this, the more reliable the information is going to be, because it's going to be harder for somebody to steal your identity. The information is readily available and easily checked and easily verified that yes, you are or are not alive. Then it kind of cuts the risk of identity theft in a lot of ways. I'm not going to judge which side of the fence you might be on that topic. That's for your comfort level and for you to decide. But I can tell you that it's been documented that the risk of identity theft through genealogical sites is minuscule compared to, what goes on from people stealing information off of social media sites and even old-fashioned mail, people stealing things out of the mail. So you just have to assess your risks and see what you're comfortable with. Like I said, that collection that I told you about, the modern phone book collection and the modern public records collection, I'm in there multiple times for multiple different reasons. Home ownership, magazines I subscribe to, colleges that I went to. So you could see my entries in here. Yes, I lived in Washington, D.C. I went to graduate school at American. So I show up in, the city directory for Washington, D.C. in 1998 while I was in graduate school. I show up in records, for being at ISU in Normal. So, you're going to show up in different records. It's just undeniable because these are public records. So it'd be curious, go in and take a look and see how many places you appear in the FamilySearch collections based on these public and readily available records. So the Wiki, like I said, I absolutely adore the Wiki. I adore the Wiki for a couple of different reasons. I adore the Wiki because it allows me to get information on the topics I'm searching, regardless of whether or not FamilySearch is the one that has or holds those records. So if I'm looking for information on Polish records, they're going to point me in the direction of the Polish archives and they're going to give me the link. Even if it's something that they don't own or is not within their collection, they're going to tell me where to go. And no other genealogy site does that. I can search by topic or by location. They give me a word list. So if I didn't speak Polish or Italian or Portuguese or French, it's going to give me the top 100 genealogical words in that language. So dates, calendars, months of the year, daughter, brother, sister, mother, birth, death, marriage. They're going to give me all those words so that when I look at the original documents, I can look for those buzzwords to see if I can find my person. What I love about FamilySearch Wiki is that anybody can contribute. So if you know of a record collection that exists that isn't listed on the Wiki, you can add it, and pages can be sponsored. So the Plainfield Public Library sponsors the Will County pages. So I add things to those, I keep track of those. Those have, those tag us as being the ones responsible for sponsoring that particular collection of pages. So if you belong to historical societies or genealogical societies, you too could also see if you can sponsor pages that are pertinent to your research as well. So here's an example. I clicked on location. I clicked on Europe. I chose Poland. Here's what the Wiki looks like. It breaks it down by categories. It gives me a very brief overview of how to do Polish research. It gives me a cheat sheet of research strategies, tells me what records exist, which is really, really helpful. Because if I'm looking for birth records and they don't have birth records because they're just baptismal records, it's going to tell me that. But then that Polish genealogical word list is here as well. So then I can download that list of the most common words related to genealogical records. Further reading, they're always going to give me more suggestions and articles to expand my research. I have access to the backlog of webinars and genealogical information finding aids that they have available on that particular country or place or topic. So the Wiki is truly outstanding in a lot of different ways. So this is just one example of one country page, but you could break it down by cities. You can break it down by county. You could break it down by township or by country. It doesn't have to just be, here's everything for the United States. I could go in and say, I want to see what records exist for Perry County, Illinois, and it's going to bring up a page similar to this. So it's just a fantastic place to go. If you don't find what you're looking for, or if you have questions that this doesn't answer, you can ask, and that's the beauty. If you click on the purple button that says Ask the FamilySearch Community, you're going to be able to ask your question, and somebody with experience or access or availability to research that particular topic is going to give you an answer. So it's a wonderful opportunity to get some of those questions that have puzzled you for a long time hopefully solved. And if not just through using the resources, then by sharing and asking the FamilySearch community, you're definitely going to benefit. I guarantee it. So I'm going to turn my camera back on. I definitely want to take some of your questions. I know I threw a lot at you. I know I talked 910 miles an hour. And for that, I apologize. And I apologize for running over. But hopefully you understand that even when you search, there are so many nuances to this that you can't just do a one and done. You have to really dig in. You have to try using those filters. You have to try using those collections. You have to play around with the names and the spellings of things. And every result is going to be different. Make sure you document it on your log so that you can find it again if you have to. But there's some great opportunity to find some gems in there.
There's absolutely so much to find on FamilySearch. We do have a question from Carolyn. No, I'm sorry. Catherine. She's asking, would anything in particular have records for divorces that you know?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a county record. It's a public record. So it would just be a matter of going into the catalog and searching by area. So not every county has divorces indexed under the title of divorce. So early ones. So we're talking, pre 1900, might be listed under chancery or listed under family court. Sometimes they're going to be listed just under circuit court. So if there's any court records listed, go through them, because they might not have had a probate court, or they might not have had a divorce court, or they might have not have had a family court in that time period, but that doesn't mean they weren't handling those cases.
Okay. And not seeing any other questions. I did see a question about, our video will be on YouTube in a few days. So give us a little bit of time to get that posted and you'll have that up. Sorry if I'm not seeing any other questions. If you have a question, you can pop it into the chat really quick.
I think you've hit them all. I think we just have a lot of experts here tonight. So.
I think,
I'm certain of that.
And if that's the case, that's okay. They can reach out. Any of you, you're welcome to reach out to me, reach out to Anne at AAPLD. You can reach out to Tina directly. I know she has her genealogy company website on the handout. We're happy to answer your questions or get you to the person that can answer your questions. So yeah, thank you both very much for joining me here tonight. I really appreciate your time and the effort you put into this, and it's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everybody. Tina. Again, any questions, just reach out to, the Algonquin Library. You can reach out to me, but happy hunting, because unfortunately, it's truly what it is. it's your hunting.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us.
All right. Have a great night. Thank you.
Everyone enjoy the night.